Welcome to Crying in the Walk-In with Sam and Kai.
We're two Seattle-based bartenders talking about the restaurant industry through a queer, non-binary, and POC lens.
Catch us chatting about workplace gossip, guest interactions, and bar education, and probably also more.
Cheers!
Okay, I think we can address that the mics are here now.
Okay.
Hello!
Hi, y'all. We're back.
We're back, and we have a special guest today. We're talking
Akin.
about... Yay!
We're so
talking
excited
about
to have
rum. We're so excited to have Jen here.
Rum.
Jen, if you wouldn't mind telling us and the listeners about yourself, that'd be so sick.
Okay. Mostly, like, who you are, what you do in the industry, how long you've been in it.
Cool.
And whatever else you
yeah,
want.
anytime fast.
Yeah. No, I'm really good at this, talking about myself.
Okay.
I love the sound of my own voice. So I'm Jen Akin. I am a huge rum fanatic, though I wasn't always a huge rum fanatic. We'll probably talk about that later. But right now I am the regional manager for a very small wine and spirits import company. So I basically do everything related to distribution and brand representation for a bunch of brands, mostly French brands. Our company is French. And before that, I was the GM of Rumba here in Seattle, curated their rum selection of over 700 bottles at this point, and, did all the education, did all the training, cocktails with my badass team.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like the last 8 years of my life.
Cool.
Basically.
Rumba was and continues to be like my favorite bar in all of Seattle.
So also, I just had a flashback to one time when we went there in college.
Uh-huh.
So you were probably working there at this time. This was probably like...
Is this something I'm not going to remember?
You might remember you had to pay my tab because my card got declined.
Oh.
Yeah. Because it was the one and only time in my adult life where my card got declined. And your lovely server I remember it so vividly, it just comes up to me and goes, "This card doesn't want to play today." And I was like, oh shit, like, this has never happened to me. And I believe I was there with you, and either you or Leaf had to
That is so
pay
funny.
my
What
tab.
a kind way to say that your card was
Yeah.
declined. I love that
is
so
amazing.
much.
Then I looked at my bank account, and I surely was $800 in overdraft.
Ooh!
And I was like, this is never happening to me again. And it
They
never
said
has.
no rum for you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, the thing is, I already drank the rum.
That's so funny.
But yeah. How long have you been in the industry? Like,
Oh my gosh. Like, in hospitality in general,
yeah.
since I was 19, and
Uh-huh.
I'm telling you right now, I'm turning 40 in February, so we're going on 21 years.
Yeah.
In the end. Well, that's insane.
That is insane.
That's a whole drinker.
Yeah, that's a whole drinker.
That's a whole lifespan of somebody who's now legal to drink in the United States.
Whoa.
I started at Applebee's, actually.
Fuck yeah.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, I was a host first, and then a server second, and then I got tired of it, and I was like, I want to go play in the back with all the boys,
Mhm.
and I asked to become a cook, and I was
really?
I was a flat top grill cook till the end of my stint at Applebee's, and then I worked at a coffee shop, and then I worked at a dive bar,
Okay.
and then I just kind of
Worked up from there.
yeah, at the dive bar, I was the beer trough girl. So I stood outside in the summertime where we had like an outdoor stage, and I was basically the bouncer for the back door to the alley that you could go out but not come back in. And then I also had like a horse trough. This is in Kansas, by the way. At a horse trough
Okay.
full of PBR tall boys,
Okay.
and like had a little lid, and then had a little opening where I could just stick my hand in, dig around, grab a nice cold PBR tall boy. And then people just paid in cash. I made cash under the table, and
It's incredible.
I would make like $300 a weekend, and it was the most fun.
That sounds so
Damn.
fucking cool.
It was the best.
Yeah.
Horse trough girl. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
Is that on your resume?
I don't put trough girl necessarily on my resume, but when it was appropriate to put that on my resume because it was so long ago, I
Yeah.
definitely put it on. And I actually, because I wanted to start really bartending, I asked them to be my reference and say that I had actually been bartending there. And they're like, well, we can't say that until you actually bartend. And they were like, come behind the bar for an hour.
Yeah.
They were like, let's learn the top 10 drinks that you'll probably be making. Yeah. So then my first bartending job, I was so not qualified. So unqualified.
I think that's kind of where most of us were at.
I feel like that's a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a lot of people these days.
A lot of people lie to get into their first one, and they're like, I've worked in the industry for like 12 million years, and then
you're
see
one of the
very
only
quickly.
people I know that actually started with bar backing and then got like almost like a real apprenticeship type situation, like with mentors and shit.
I guess, maybe. I don't know.
I had.
It was not very fun.
Yeah.
The bar backing part.
Yeah, I know.
Really gross.
I never had to do the bar backing gig.
I'm happy for you.
I mean, I love support roles, but mostly like hosting.
I loved it a lot, but I am glad that I don't have to do it anymore. For sure.
Yeah.
It's nice to do it periodically, though.
Depending on where you bar back.
Yeah.
I used to fill in bar back shifts at Rumba all the time because I loved it so much.
Yeah.
Because it was like a great opportunity to be behind the bar without like, you're just head down working. And I don't want to say not interacting with guests, but you're not interacting. Every once in a while you need a break from the public a little bit. And so I had a blast. But also I've also bar backed at places where, the bartenders would make you burn their wells for no reason and, stuff like that. So not fun. Yeah.
I love it now, like being where I'm at and like being able to like, kind of take a break from people. Mm-hmm. But I think when I first started out, when I was like 21 and kind of being low key like abused by the bartenders for no reason, I was like, I don't fucking want to do this anymore. But so glad.
I think that's the only bad part. I love the physical labor of
it's nice and fun.
Oh
but
my god,
having them watch you close down the whole bar isn't super fun.
No.
While they're drinking.
All right, rum.
Let's talk about it.
Let's do it. Do we want to talk about history first? That was like in my head how.
Yeah.
You want to talk about the history of rum?
Yeah. Where it comes from.
Oh man. Okay, so first of all,
we don't have to go.
No.
All right, we're in it.
We can do this.
Buckle up.
To the listeners, I did not do any homework before this.
Okay.
And it's been 2 years since I've talked about this. But the basic history of rum, first of all, it's not super duper officially well known.
Yeah.
They say the first like rum distillery is the Mount Gay distillery. And that was in the early 1700s, 17, it's on the bottle.
1703.
Thank you. 03. Yeah, thanks. But we all know that that's likely not the very first rum that ever existed. Alcohol goes way, 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 way far back. Mm-hmm. I would say like the first kind of iteration of a rum would be like Arak, the Indonesian spirit made from sugarcane and rice. So I think that one, to me, kind of like is the start of the category as a whole that, we are aware of. Mm-hmm. But, you think about all of these islands that have been growing sugarcane for a really long time, which most of them, by the way, sugarcane is not indigenous to those islands. That was brought with all of like the trade routes and everything long, long, long ago. So if you think about, they've all been making, they've had sugarcane growing. They've been probably utilizing it a lot longer than just, early 1700s. Yeah. So if you think about it more like, people making it for themselves and just kind of backyard distilling, then it likely goes back far further. Yeah. But as far as like modern day rum goes, from what we can tell, like the official first like rum distillery on record would be Mount Gay in 1703. And then beyond that, you just kind of have like all of these emerging islands that we become aware of. It's not that they had just started, it's just that we are now becoming aware of it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the history of rum is a very, very complicated, problematic, and honestly a great history lesson and a great way to like decenter yourself from, alcohol in general, because learning about rum really you have to open yourself up to so many different things that have happened. Yeah. Good and bad, mostly bad. Yeah. And it's a great way to kind of learn world history from a perspective that's not like U.S. American public school based.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So about that, And a Bottle of Rum book that I just read was interesting because it kind of starts at the point of like the islands and the colonization that was happening in the 1700s, or sorry, 16 and 1700s, and it was interesting because it kind of implied a little bit that like rum came from the colonization instead of like what you're saying, that like this has been happening, like indigenous people from Iraq have been doing this pre-colonization of the islands, and sugarcane being moved down to the islands and everything. But where the history point of that book starts is right there, and it's like a weird way to think about it in my head.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, obviously distillation methods were brought to like the Caribbean and to the islands by, you know, like the Spanish, the French, the English. They brought like the equipment, the methods, and they brought sugarcane to most places. I mean, it's, you know, indigenous in Hawaii, so, you know, they likely have been doing it for a much longer time. And like, we all know that distillation predates, like, you know, the colonization of the islands and the 1700s. So, you know, they've been making it everywhere in the U.S. Or everywhere in the world far longer than, you know, what we know of as modern day rum. But yes, did they bring the distillation vessels? Like, they brought that technology? Yes. But do I think that they were like, here, let me show you how to make rum? No.
Yeah.
They had never seen sugarcane. They didn't know what it was. I don't think. And like, I can't particularly know exactly how that went down, what the conversation was, whatever. But if you look at places like Haiti, that has been isolated from the rest of the world, you know, since the, 1700s, 1800s, when they got their independence from France. If you look at that, then you can see that, you know, Clarin is a beautiful sugarcane spirit that they have been making on their own for a very long time. And this is the kind of thing where, you know, families have these little stills in their backyards and they're making it from, you know, wild cane, wild yeast, on these like little handmade copper pot stills. Yeah. So yeah, I think that we owe indigenous people a lot for the rum that we drink.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess as like, that was a really brief history.
Yes.
There's a lot. There's pirates and sailors and other things in there too.
There's a lot. Yes.
But anyhow, getting into like the rum that we drink today, we were kind of mulling it over before you got here, just like sugar, or like rum is made from sugarcane by definition, yes.
Yes.
And you have what, molasses?
You have molasses.
Cane.
Yeah, you have molasses, and then you have different varying degrees of like sugar products, basically. So you have sugarcane juice at the very start. You have sugarcane juice, which would be like your rum agricoles and your agricole style, quote unquote. So, you know, cachaça, Clarin, rum agricole from Martinique, sugarcane rum from Guadeloupe. I mean, there's plenty of places. Hawaii makes an agricole style. So that's your start. And then as you refine sugar into the sugar crystals that we know as like table sugar, your byproduct is molasses. So I would say like 95% of the world's rum is made from molasses. So what most people think of as rum is molasses based. So, you know, Mount Gay, Appleton Estate, etc. Don Q, Bacardi, all of those are made from molasses. And that makes total sense because you have refined sugar, which is a product that makes you money, and then you have molasses, which is a product that can make you money making rum, right?
Yeah.
So then beyond that, depending on how you're refining, you have things like panela, you have like a turbinado, you have what Colombia calls sugarcane honey. Okay. You have various different kind of like iterations of sugar products and byproducts that we make rum out of. But I would say as far as like flavor profiles go and classifications, it's molasses versus fresh cane juice. Yeah. In my mind. Yeah. You do have like sugarcane syrup, which does give you a different quality than molasses, if you can imagine.
Do you know any examples of
sugarcane syrup? That are available in the U.S.? Not really, but I can tell you.
Because I was going to say, I don't know if I've had.
I'd have to honestly think about that. But if you go to Rumba and drink St. Nicholas Abbey, that is a sugarcane syrup rum. And there's plenty out there.
Yeah.
I think I don't want to say wrong because there might be like bigger rum experts listening to this, so I'm gonna have to go back and look. It's been 2 years, okay, since I've been
That's
there.
okay. We know not very much at
Yeah,
all.
we're
So
not-
this is as much
so-
for the
so
listeners
for-
as us.
From my rum history, I just came into liking rum, and like you were saying at the beginning, like you weren't always the biggest
No.
fan. No, I like just came into it because what I grew up on was Captain Morgan and Coke,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
and
Kraken.
and Kraken, like all spiced rums and stuff like that.
That's the reason why I didn't like rum.
Yes.
Right,
That's the reason
exactly.
why most people I find
Yeah.
don't. Because anytime like
Except
you have
for
a
my
rum
dad.
cocktail, except for your dad. I feel like people are always like, ew, I don't want that rum cocktail. I don't like rum. And I'm like, wait until you taste it because you are thinking of a very different rum than what's in it.
I was actually out with a group of people, non-industry people, the other day, and we were actually at Navy Strength we went to Sip in Santa, and he was like, "What should I drink, Jen? I don't like rum." And I'm like, first of all, why are we?
Yeah, we're in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of these cocktails don't have rum. Also, why don't you like rum?
Yeah.
I was like, that's like saying you don't like red wine.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many
There's
varieties.
maybe a couple of red wines you don't like, but
Exactly.
there's
Yeah.
gonna be some
You
you
can't
do.
blanket statement it
Right,
like that.
you can't. And he was like, really? And I was like, yes, let me tell you. Let me talk
You're like,
to you
you're
about
talking to
this.
the right person.
Yeah.
Let me talk you through this, buddy.
I had a similar conversation about gin with somebody recently,
Mhm.
and I was like, you probably only tasted one gin that tasted like a pine tree,
Yes.
and you're scared of it now. Like,
Yeah.
let's explore.
That was my first venture into anything other than vodka when I was I was really old at this point. I was like 28, 27, 28. And I had been a like beer, shots of bourbon, and appletinies. And that
Hell
was
yeah.
it. That was all I drank.
I haven't had a good apple tea in a while.
These were not good
Oh,
appletinies.
damn.
I worked at a bar. It was like a beer bar during the day, like a really nice beer bar during the day, and then at night it turned into a club, like with a disco ball and a DJ, and we pulled all the tables and chairs out, and we
Nice.
had like jungle juice and fish bowls and Vegas bombs and whatever. And on Thursdays it was ladies' night. This was 2011 in Kansas City, Missouri. And on ladies' night, the appletinis and the Cosmos were half off.
Hell yeah.
And they were, which meant they were $4.
Oh,
And I always
incredible.
opened on Thursday, so I'd get off work and I'd sit at the same table every single time, and I'd just order. And of course, they're not like super strong.
yeah,
you
because
know?
they're just
yeah.
in like a tub
So
somewhere.
I would drink like 6 of them,
yeah.
and I just became known as the girl that that drank the appletinis at work. Anyway,
Yeah.
that was all I liked to drink. Oh, and Malibu and pineapple. Which that is not rum, so
Yeah.
don't say that I was drinking rum before I said I was drinking rum.
Yeah.
It's not rum. Anyway,
Heard
Do
that.
love when
Heard
people do that.
no, it's not rum.
When people do what?
Get like, they're like, oh, my favorite rum's Malibu. I'm like, please, 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 please.
Oh, is your favorite Scotch Fireball?
Oh my god.
They're like, yeah.
I mean,
How'd you know?
alright. Oh no, it's Screwball. Thank you.
Yeah.
God.
Okay, so we were kind of talking about molasses versus sugarcane.
Yes.
What?
Oh yeah, what a tangent.
Yeah, no, I love a good tangent. What are the different? I mean, I kind of know, but like the flavor profiles that you're gonna get out of the two. Like agricole is gonna be like that grassy.
Mm-hmm. Vegetal. You get a lot more. So I should say also the job that I have now. I work with rum agricoles almost exclusively. So we do have rum in our portfolio. We are a French company, so we focus a lot on rum agricole. We had Trois Rivières until Campari bought it,
Mm-hmm.
and now we are bringing in Des Pas and Dion, which are 2 really beautiful, like bigger brands in Martinique. So my rum agricole knowledge is now like where most of my knowledge lies. Whereas when I was at Rumba, I was like really kind of keen on everything and
Mhm.
really up to date and had like my brain full of all of the knowledge of rum, which is why like I'm floundering to remember the year
I mean, this
that
is
Mount Gay
101.
started.
This is 101.
Yeah, it's okay.
Listen, I've been graduated and I am now an alum. But,
Yeah.
after you graduate, you kind of sometimes forget some things. But as a whole, yes, of course I remember most things. But yes, rum agricole, which is my personal all-time most favorite style of rum.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're both like wiggling in the
Yeah,
background.
yeah,
over
well,
here.
Are you like agave drinkers? Were you agave drinkers before?
Yeah.
Yes,
that
pretty
makes
much exclusively.
complete- yes. because you have a lot of very similar profiles and like diversity within that one category because of what it's made from.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is, unlike molasses, which is a refined byproduct, which, you know, you kind of take out all of the rum producers will tell you that, you know, they have specific molasses that they like to use, and they like certain molasses, and I'm sure that that's true. And I'm sure like the very, very, very advanced like rum drinker could probably say, oh, I like this better because to me, it just like a molasses rum is a molasses rum. They don't all taste the same, of course not. But you don't have the diversity,
like the little intricacies.
Like, exactly. You don't have the terroir diversity, I should say.
Right.
With molasses rums, your diversity comes from, you know, how it's distilled, how it's aged, how it's blended, et cetera, et cetera.
Barrels.
Yeah, things like esters and you know, filtration and stuff like that.
Yeah, and on that note, if I were a whiskey drinker, I would probably like lean
Barbados rums. Whiskey drinkers are Barbados rum drinkers. Like I've never. That was one thing we did a lot at Rumba. Is like you take people and they're like, I don't like rum. What do you like? I like this spirit, that spirit, and then you can make recommendations. Yeah, and Barbados rums, to me, work the best for like bourbon drinkers because they have a lot of like those similar kind of profiles.
Okay.
But as far as rum agricole goes, yeah, so you have the terroir influence, which means, you know, you have different cane varietals. You have different places where it's growing. You have different environments, different soil compositions, different elevations, very similar to like tequila and wine. Yeah.
Like water sources and
stuff.
stuff.
Water sources. All of those things are crucial and important. You know, how much sun it gets throughout the day. You know, in Martinique, you have like a really diverse kind of terroir, essentially, on the island. So you have, you know, a lot of distilleries on the southern part of the island. Then you have a few kind of in the middle and then up towards the northernmost part, which is where Mount Pelée is. The mountain obviously changes the soil quite a bit. And there was an eruption there in 1902, I believe it was, which dramatically altered the soil of everything around it. You also have like the water source. This is something that Rum Jam really like touts as their water source. Comes kind of straight off the mountain. In their distillery, you can actually go like drink it. It's obviously filtered, but they really love their water. It's like very clean, very fresh, and like the mineral content and stuff like that. So to me, it's really fun, and you get this a lot with Clarin too, which, you know, Clarin is made from fresh cane juice. We don't call it agricole because it's not made in Martinique. We can probably go into that if you guys want.
That was actually going to be a clarifying question.
Okay.
Love that.
I'll just clarify really fast right now. So the French, being the French, decided to put a ton of rules on their rum. And they have their own AOC, much like cognac, Armagnac, Champagne, etc.
Yeah.
Calvados. So the Martinique AOC has rules like where it can be made. It can only come from Martinique. How it's distilled. It can only be distilled on basically modified column stills, so no pot distillation. It has regulations on age statements on the bottle. So if you see something that says VSOP or XO, you know exactly how old that is. If it says 10 years, the minimum age in that bottle is 10 years old. Unlike a lot of rums that if it says 10 years, it could be a blend of rums from 6 to 12.
Yeah.
But it has to be the youngest marked, right?
It has to be, so yes, in Martinique, it has to be the youngest marked, yes. And then it also has regulations on the type of cane that you can use, where it can grow. It's like 30 pages long. It's very extensive. Yeah, and they keep altering it. They keep editing it, which is good. But
yeah. Also, this might be kind of a stupid question, but we have pot stills and column stills. Is agricole all column?
It is all, yes, it must be made on what they call a Creole column still, which is basically just a modified column still because the French like to be different, and it's really just a modified.
The French like to be different.
From what I can tell, that is something that was, listen, a French person said that to me when we were talking about agricole. I was like, what is a Creole column still? Because I could not, for the life of me, figure out really the difference.
Yeah.
And, you know, caller, please call in and let me know what Creole columns. I've been to so many agricole distilleries in Martinique, and they just look like column stills to me.
Yeah.
They like moved one thing like
Yeah.
an inch to the left.
I think
and
it
they're
might
like,
have to do
"Modified."
with rectify. I don't know. So anyway, yes, it has to be made. That is in the AOC rules. Creole column still.
Okay.
You do have some distilleries in Martinique that are making sugarcane-based rums on pot stills, and they're so fun. They're so good. Rumba has some. It's the A1710.
You have to go try that.
It's so. Oh, and actually, St. James is making some now too.
Oh,
and it
great
might be
idea.
available. I don't know if it's available in Washington yet. Maybe.
When it does, let us know.
Yeah.
We'll go drink it.
Right. Yeah, because it's very good. So that's, you also have regulation put on it, which this is one of my favorite parts, based on the, like, essentially the ester count or the congener count, volatile elements, essentially, so the things that give it flavor. So you have a minimum amount that you have to hit for each age statement. So for Blanc, it is, which is unaged rested, I want to say it's like 250 minimum, like, ester congener count, which
How
means
do they
that
measure
it's in the lab.
Okay.
Yeah, in the lab. It's the same way, not the same way, but it's similar to, like, you can measure sugar. And
Yeah.
It's sciencey, and I've never actually seen it done, but I'm sure they have some sort of method of
Just like
of pulling.
pipette and petri dishes. and
Yeah,
all
well,
that.
I'm sure that they're just analyzing all of the elements. So
Yeah.
you have, like, obviously different chemical elements in there. You have alcohol, you have acetaldehyde, you have ester. Well, esters, it's kind of a combination of a couple things, but yeah, you have esters in there, and you can, I think, essentially break all those apart
Yeah.
and kind of, like, figure out how much of those that you have in the lab. It's, again, I don't know exactly. You'd have to
Yeah.
you'd have to bring on an actual chemist to talk about that one.
Someone find one.
I'm
Yeah.
good. I'm not even. I'm just gonna sit there, like, not understanding it.
Blinking.
So I don't know. That's a good idea for us. But yeah, where were we at?
Oh, we're just talking about
remember.
how agricole is different. And so to me, the reason I like it is because of that terroir difference, like being able to put, like I was saying, clarins. You can put 3 clarins next to each other, all made on the same island, all made from fresh cane juice, made on a similar still, and they are so vastly different simply because of the type of cane, the soil it grows in, the yeast, the wild yeast is in the air. And to me, that is it's a beautiful example of how diverse and insanely complicated this category is. Because that's just 3 out of how many.
That was always my favorite about mezcal.
Yeah.
I got really passionate about that whenever people were like, I hate mezcal, it's all smoky. I'd be like, wait, like, you don't even know about all the beautiful intricacies of like terroir and all this stuff. So yeah, I love hearing out about that shit. It's so interesting.
So for pot still though, I know that Jamaican rum is usually all pot still,
with the exception of Appleton Estate, which is a blend of pot and column distillation. Every other distillery, like big distillery that I'm aware of, not like backyard distilleries, every distillery in Jamaica is all pot still. Should be. Hamden, Worthy Park, Long Pond.
Smith and Cross.
Smith and Cross is actually, it is Jamaican, but it is a blended rum that is blended by E&A Shear in Amsterdam. They're a big, huge blending house. So if you think about like a lot of rums that you don't know exactly who's making them, or independent bottlers, a lot of times are buying or basically hiring E&A Shear to come up with a blend for them.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably get in touch with them and be like, hey, we want a rum made.
Next project.
That's so wild. You have like 17 projects going on and you need to protect
I need more. I like hyperfixating.
So we don't actually know exactly what rums go into Smith and Cross. I'm sure there's definitely pot still in there, but if they're buying any rum from Appleton Estate, which they probably aren't because they're not really a distillery that sells rum, I don't think. I don't know. Maybe they do. But like Hamden and Worthy Park, they both sell, and Long Pond, they sell a lot of rum. And this is a pretty common practice. Like Barbados, Foursquare, Richard Seal sells a lot of his rum to independent bottlers. and West Indies Rum Distillery, they obviously, before Ferrand bought them, they were selling their rum to a lot of different distilleries, and they still are making Malibu actually there. So
they're still making Malibu.
they are.
I was, just like any good bartender, Googling rum facts earlier.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that Bacardi is like one of the biggest. Is it not like the biggest rum producer?
I want to say it's the largest. Yeah.
In the world.
Yeah.
And that's in.
That's in Puerto Rico. They have Cuban origins though.
Okay.
So that's that story. The story of Cuban rum is insane, and actually, I highly recommend. There's a podcast called Business Wars. There we go, Business Wars. It's one of my favorite podcasts of all time because it goes into how like big corporations, big companies kind of battled it out. So they have like a Pixar versus Disney. They have Toyota versus Honda.
Yeah.
So this is Pernod Ricard versus Bacardi, and Pernod Ricard being the owner of Havana Club now. Yeah. So it goes into the history of Havana Club, Bacardi, why Bacardi was basically pushed out. They were exiled. There was a lot of turmoil going on in Cuba at the time, as we all know. And they were exiled, and then they've distilled in multiple other countries, Spain being one of them, Mexico, and now they are. I think they might actually still be distilling in some of those places, but their main place is Puerto Rico. That's where the company is. They landed in Puerto Rico shortly after leaving Cuba.
Okay.
But I highly recommend everybody go listen to that episode, even if you're like not a huge rum fanatic, because the history of that is incredible.
Yeah, that sounds really fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I have any more specific rum questions because we went over column and pot stills. But maybe we could quickly go through or I guess maybe the islands and go in general, what they're producing. Like we talked about Jamaican rums. We talked about the French islands, which are Haiti.
The French-owned islands?
Yeah.
Well, Haiti is Haiti. I mean, the French colonized it, but they won their independence from France.
That's right.
That is also, if you want to hear why, we need to be very socially and culturally aware of rum-producing countries, Haiti is, the best example of that. In winning their independence from France, France actually cut them off from everything and created the economic devastation that still exists there today. And one thing that I really love about Clarin being brought to the U.S. is it's a beautiful thing being made by Haitian people that I hope can be a great industry for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's another amazing history lesson that starts with rum and takes you down a crazy rabbit hole. But yeah, we can. So I remember when I first got into rum, there was basically three ways. He might talk about it in here. There's basically three ways that people were classifying rum. We now don't really talk about that because, these I before E except after C, there's exceptions to every rule. Well, with this one, there's so many exceptions that it's almost this isn't a great way to classify it. I still teach new rum tenders, as we call them. I still teach them this because it's a good starting point.
Yeah.
Especially if you are trying to make recommendations to people that have rums that they enjoy, and if you kind of know the basics of who is producing what styles of rum, then it can help you, and you can kind of build from there. So we used to say that there are three styles: French, English, and Spanish, all based on who was colonizing who at the time that they decided to start making rum. So your Spanish rums would be like Havana Club, Bacardi, Don Q. Your English style rums would be Barbados, Jamaica, Guyana. And then your French style rums would be obviously Martinique, but then you also have Guadeloupe. I wouldn't put Haiti in there because Haiti is they're doing their own thing, and they use pot stills almost exclusively, which is a very non-French thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's also crazy too because Haiti's right next to the Dominican Republic, which is very quote unquote Spanish style, so all column distilled rums. But yeah, so as far as French style rums, you have Martinique, Guadeloupe. Those would be like your biggest ones. And that really kind of tells you what to kind of expect from those islands. So with Spanish style, you have column distillation almost nearly exclusively. With English, you have usually a blend of pot and column distillation or just pot distillation, but you can also have just column distillation. And then in French rum producing countries, you have column. But again, you also have some pot distillation happening there as well. So beyond that, like, then you get into things like cachaça, and like true rum nerds will tell you that cachaça and clarin are not rum.
Yeah.
They are cachaça and clarin. I tell newbies you can absolutely call them rum.
Yeah.
Like, I think getting that complicated when somebody's first learning is, doing a disservice.
Or also when you're like communicating with guests too, like
yes,
because
they
don't
care. When I'm talking to guests, I'm basically like cachaça is a Brazilian style rum.
Yeah, and
just to simplify it for.
I've argued with rum people about this before, and usually it's rum people that aren't working with the everyday guests like we are. And so I'm like, well, do you want people knowing that cachaça is not rum and like having to listen to me talk for 10 minutes about the history of all this, or do you want them drinking it?
Yeah.
Those are the thing. And honestly, like Kohana is a great example of this. So they got a little bit of pushback because they put agricole style on their bottle, or agricole on their bottle, the word. And there's a lot of disagreements about whether or not you can call cane-based spirit agricole, because it's technically just AOC. Martinique rums are agricole. But if you think of agricole as just made from sugarcane distillate, then that would apply to Kohana. It would apply to anything made from sugarcane. But then you're also doing a disservice to things like cachaça and to clarin, and then also to like Charonda, and all these different classifications of different spirits made in different places. So
it gets so tangled.
It's very
tangled
tangled.
down the line.
I know. It's super tangled, and honestly, I think this is a big reason why rum hasn't progressed as much in the spirits world as most other spirits, because it's complicated, it's confusing. You never know what you're going to get based on a label, unless you are knowledgeable and know that, okay, this distillery from Barbados, you know that they don't add sugar, you know that the age is the minimum age, you know exactly where it's coming from, what it's made from, or an AOC agricole, things like that, which is like a lot to ask a new person just getting into rum, You should, like bourbon, if something says bourbon, you know pretty much what to expect. Obviously there's different variations and preferences in that category, but for the most part, like there's all rules put upon it saying like, okay, this is how we make it, this is how it's aged, this is et cetera, et cetera. And then I don't want to say unfortunately, because one of the most beautiful things about rum is that, everybody kind of has their own way of doing it. A lot of people say, I think actually he says rum has no rules, but a lot of people argue that's actually not true. It does have rules, it just kind of depends on where the rum is coming from.
Wow, that's so interesting. It hurts my brain a little bit.
It's a lot. You can see why some stuff has like escaped my brain.
There's so many tiny little details.
All right.
You ready?
Back to rum.
There we go. Back to rum.
Okay. So before the break,
your little dinosaur hands.
We mentioned that rum hasn't progressed as much as like other spirits in the United States, or probably in general.
Well, in general, in places where it wasn't already like the best-selling spirit. So obviously in Martinique, rum outsells almost everything. But yes, in the U.S. and in the Western world, I'd say, U.S., Europe.
And so, why do we think that is? What cultural?
There's several reasons. I mean, there's the one we touched on earlier, is that it's complicated for the average consumer to understand.
Right.
And then there are the more complicated reasons that, again, so many people don't want to dive into this, and unfortunately, this is just a big part of rum. It's a big piece of it.
Yeah.
And rum is associated with brown people, black people, non-white people.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of why, like, when I first started learning about rum, I was kind of taught, like, oh, rum was just made because they had this molasses left over and they were feeding their animals with it. And they were like, oh, what if we just made a spirit for us to drink?
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of, like, had this, like, very, like, it was an accident and we were just doing it from the dregs of the shit,
Yeah.
Like, it was just, we just wanted to make something out of nothing, and here we have, like, this very crude spirit that, we only drink because it was the only thing to drink.
It's kind of like infantilizing.
It's very, yeah, and it's very, like, even when you see or hear it kind of being, like, flourished upon, or, like, people kind of fantasizing about rum, it's still, like, this fantasy of, like, oh, these, like, really primitive people doing, like, this really cool thing, making this stuff.
Exotic people.
I fucking hate it.
Yeah.
And it's so, and honestly, okay, so also, I was on a Tales of the Cocktail panel in 2020, online, obviously, because of the pandemic, but it was about the decolonization of rum, and it featured Ian Burrell, Jade Marley, who was, like, a huge proponent during the, I don't know if you remember, the kind of, like, internet backlash of the Velier brands. But Jade Marley, she was a very outspoken about all of that at the time. And so we did this panel together, and we talked, one thing that I brought up, which, again, I was also the only white person on this panel.
Okay.
And I asked the person who asked me to be on this panel, I was like, listen, I really love that you want me to be on this panel. I just want to make sure that, like, this is a voice that needs to be heard. And she was like, no, you're like very outspoken about a lot of these things, and I think it's important. She's like, with the bar that you run, to have you on there, which I think is great. It was very intimidating for me to be on this panel because, this is definitely not my area of expertise, and I'm learning every day, and I definitely make mistakes and all of that. But one of the things that I brought up was the way that specifically the Clarins have been, like, sold to me and many people, which is, again, this glorification of very primitive ways of making rum. So, they're still using donkeys to haul in the sugarcane from the fields. They still hand cut everything. It's very, like, raw. It's very, non-industrial, and I'm kind of like, well, are they doing that because they literally don't have the economy to have the machinery and the technology to do all of this? Or are they doing it because they truly want to preserve, like, this original style of making it?
Yeah.
And it was also sold to me as, like, the moonshine of the rum world.
Right.
Now, I brought that up as a negative because when you talk about moonshine in this country, at least to me, and my experience with talking about moonshine, it's not, like, the greatest thing. It's not something that's well known for being super well made. During Prohibition, it was just kind of like the thing that people drank because it was available, right?
Right.
Now, there is a lot of tradition in a lot of places in the U.S., in the South especially, where moonshine holds different values and it has a lot more respect. And then the word moonshine also means different things in different parts of the world as well. And so, obviously the other people on the panel had different experiences because of how they grew up and their traditions, their history. And so to them, calling it moonshine was, like, a good thing. And I was like, well, this is where your background, your history, who you are, how you were raised, and the words that you use are super important. Because if you're talking to a bunch of, white people from Kansas, moonshine doesn't hold the same kind of, like, reverence. And it's not something that means something positive. And it's like, okay, well, that's your perspective, but it's not mine. Okay, yes, but that's why you have to be careful with the words that you use, because you could be talking to somebody who doesn't think the best about moonshine, and calling Clarin moonshine might turn somebody completely off. So, the words that we use to describe these spirits mean so much. the names that we choose, the way we advertise them. I can't remember what rum it was. It was a celebrity rum that I don't think ever got much footing, but they basically were advertising it like the origin was this guy who was like, he dropped down in the Amazon rainforest or whatever area he was in. I don't know, the jungle of some freaking country. And he stumbled upon these indigenous people making rum, and he wanted to bring that to the United States. And so here's this white dude taking, and I was like, that is no,
the white savior of booze.
Not. Yeah. Because that's really nuanced and intricate.
It's incredibly nuanced, and honestly, it comes from working in rum for 6+ years. And thinking about it constantly. And people ask me a lot. They were like, how do you select rums for the collection? And I go, is it ethical? Mm-hmm. Is it good? And is it priced appropriately? Mm-hmm. Number one being, is it ethical? There are certain rums that you could never not have, because then you would probably go out of business because they're your top sellers.
Right.
And honestly, no rum is completely ethical. No spirit is completely ethical.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about are you guys familiar with what happened with the Florida Cognac thing about 10 years ago?
No, not really.
So Florida Cognac, they had this mass death problem with their cane workers. So people were dying in huge amounts while working in the cane fields for Florida Cognac. And they discovered that they were basically dying of dehydration. They weren't provided adequate breaks, adequate water, adequate shade, and they were dying of kidney disease of unknown origin, basically. And it all got tied back to these horrible worker conditions in the cane fields, which technically Florida Cognac doesn't own, but that's who they were working. Yes. Yeah. And so Bobby Hugel, actually, of Anvil in Houston, kind of started this. He posted and he was like, I'm dumping all my Florida Cognac down the drain. I will not be supporting this brand until they fix it. And they did fix it, because so many bartenders were like, I refuse to support this brand. And now, Florida Cognac is now it's back on the Rumba shelves. I brought it back after they made crazy changes, breaks every 30 minutes, water breaks every 30 minutes, longer breaks every hour, stuff like that. Maximum hours they can work in a day, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So again, there's no such thing as a truly 100% ethical spirit, but there are ones that absolutely should not be supported.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And at one time, Florida Cognac was one of those brands, and the brand I was just talking about that I don't think ever made it to fruition. The guy who was
the celebrity one. Yeah.
And I think you guys are very familiar with this in the tequila world, celebrity brands and things like that.
Yeah.
It's huge in the tequila
Big
world.
sigh.
But to me, it's such an important conversation in the grand scheme of the rum world that it has to be had. So
yeah, no, I think that was the most exciting part of the conversation. I feel bad saying this, but sometimes I am more interested in the cultural parts of spirit and the bartending world than I am the spirits itself.
Yeah.
But we should get into tiki culture a little bit.
Yeah, along the same lines.
Yeah.
So you said earlier, you were like, this is just a hodgepodge amalgamation of so many different cultures combined into one, and that is quintessentially how tiki was started. Mm-hmm. Tiki was started in the 1930s, I believe, is when Don the Beachcomber opened his first tiki bar in LA. And it was so Don the Beachcomber, he was an avid traveler from a very young age. He was, I don't know if you've kind of read anything about this guy, but
I got a small history lesson on him.
So
I haven't read anything, though.
He spent a lot of time traveling by boat to a lot of different places and working in restaurants, working with, actually it comes into play later, working with a lot of Filipino people as well. Yeah. And, of course, all of the articles you read about him, they're like, he had a real strong reverence for the Filipino people he worked, and it's just
the
okay.
way my blood is fucking boiling right now.
Especially when you think about why the Filipino population was so big in LA at the time, which again, everybody should read into it. It's fascinating. But so he basically took all of the things that he liked from all of his travels, and he turned it into the first tiki bar. The word tiki in and of itself is just like, it means something to people that is not a kitschy cocktail bar. So of course, because of the time that he opened this bar, it was like, you had all these sailors and military personnel coming back from like the South Pacific and all of that. And so he took a lot of the imagery from the South Pacific and turned it into the imagery of the bar. Yeah. But the cocktails, the South Pacific is not known for like cocktails and things like that. They drink, but they are not known for like fruity tropical cocktails. That was taken mostly from the Caribbean and like Cuba, and then also just the U.S. creations of what they thought. So they take tropical fruits and things like that and created these cocktails. And, I'd say 50% of all of the tiki cocktails that we know today, probably even more than that, are Don the Beachcomber's recipes. And honestly, a lot of them are the four boys of tiki.
Yes, they are.
Their recipes.
The ones who were making the drinks for him during...
Yes, the only people he trusted with recipes and things like that.
Because they were probably their recipes.
I have no doubt in my mind that he did not fully create all of those cocktails. So, I could talk for like hours about the world of tiki and how it's problematic in so many ways, culturally and for rum in general. I think the idea of tiki is amazing. I love the idea of escaping and like leaving your world behind. I think,
but that's also like every bar.
It should be. Yeah. Right. Like you should walk into a place and like relax and let go. And it's one of the reasons I love Roquette. Like you can't see out the window. You go in there. You forget that exists. Rumba's the same way. Rumba is just a very you know what I'm trying to say? It transports you. And it's great. Like that's what it should do. Right. Even if it's just like your local dive bar. And then there are some bars that do it to a bigger degree than others, and that's kind of what tiki is based upon. But there's also the religious aspect that has come in that is the very basis of that's where the issues really start. And then obviously like the
because wasn't it that most like tiki quote unquote like mugs were all deity? And I mean that's like a tiki is like a totem essentially. It is a religious idol. And again, I am not an expert on this particular like as a faith-based, I don't want to call it a religion. It's not a religion. It's like a faith-based believing, and these are like deities to them, and they are important and spiritual and all of those things. And I'm not an expert on that, but I can tell you that, before we opened Inside Passage, I did a ton of research, and that included talking to many, many people that were very relevant to that conversation. And getting, exactly what that meant to people that were not me, which is why there are no idols at Inside Passage. And we got rid of all the ones that Rumba had too, because we had like some decor that was very traditional.
I feel like it kind of goes into like trying on other people's like religions and cultures just like to do it, you know, like I don't know, it just gives
as
me
a cosplay.
Yeah.
It's very much like it's a cosplay of somebody of something that is so important to somebody.
There's like such a thin line between like appreciating it and like the escapism aspect and then like being incredibly fucking offensive.
Like you just like you don't have to cosplay it. Like you can enjoy it. You can throw like you can have fun decor in your bar without using people's deities, without using people's appropriating,
or just like without boiling the entire like South Pacific experience down to one singular thing, where it's like many different countries that all have their own like cultures and things that matter to them, and like just taking tiny aspects and cherry picking the things that you think are the most cool and putting and like making Asian and tiki like one big thing.
wild. In the conversation of rum, how do you think these types of like bars inhibit or affect like the guest experience around rum? Because I feel like when you think tiki cocktails, it's like a certain line of cocktails, rum's involved, but like the reason rumba is so awesome is because it's not, I don't know how to describe it. It's not like,
it's not a tiki bar.
Yeah.
It's a rum bar.
Yeah.
And that is something that we battled up until Inside Passage was open. And I mean, even still, people still kind of call it a tiki bar. And something that is so irritating to me is that rum gets pigeonholed into the category of tiki, which does it the biggest disservice, because we all know tiki cocktails are sweet, full of fruit juices and syrups and layers of flavor, and like there's definitely a time and a place, and a lot of people really like that, but a lot of people don't. You have like your old-fashioned drinkers that are like, I would never touch a tiki cocktail. And that's so they avoid rum because of that, because they think rum is only good for frozen daiquiris, pina coladas, and tiki cocktails. And that's absolutely not true. Like the rumba old fashioned, so many people were like, oh, I didn't know
that you could do this.
It's so crazy. Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Rum is actually good.
You like Negronis? Let me show you this. Like,
Ooh.
Kingston Negronis. I mean, rum Negronis, definitely. Kingston Negronis, specifically with Jamaican rum, are like chef's kiss. So good. So to me, I very much dislike that, tiki and rum are like intertwined in so many people's brains. And tiki is such a huge subculture of drinking. It's the longest running drink trend, if you can think, if you think about it, that has ever existed. It's been going strong since the 30s. It's like a thing that everyone's familiar with. Everybody has heard of a zombie. Like everybody's heard of a Mai Tai.
Zombie's like the first one that pops in my head.
Yeah. Yep.
That is wild.
So many people, without knowing anything about rum, know about tiki and make assumptions. And like you said, not every tiki drink is rum. I'd say most of them are, but there's plenty out there that are not rum-based. Because again, it's an amalgamation of so many different things, and there's nothing that says, there's no definition of what a tiki cocktail is. Like none at all. Like what makes a tiki cocktail tiki? Well, you just kind of know, or you just say that it is.
Vibes.
It's vibes. It's vibes only. Like why is why is a Mai Tai considered a tiki cocktail, but like a passion fruit daiquiri isn't? Like why? And I think somebody described it to me once. They were like, oh, it's just like layers of flavor and citrus and juice. Okay, well, I think there's plenty that don't necessarily, and spice. Spice was like a crucial element of that. But it's still like there's exceptions to that. And I mean, I think that if I just said this is a tiki cocktail and it kind of fit that, people would be like, all right, it's a tiki cocktail.
Okay. I don't have any more questions.
Our brains are spinning.
No.
Mine is.
I feel grounded. I feel grounded. I feel like an expert now.
Oh,
thanks to Jen
toss.
Akin.
Jen, do you have any other final thoughts or parting words?
We do have one more question.
We do have another question, but that'll be after this.
Oh, any parting words of wisdom? If I said anything wrong, do not at me in the comments. Thank you. I realize that I haven't studied this in a long time, but as a general like overview, I mean, I think that's like a really good place to start. It's just kind of like what rum is made of, why there's such diversity in the category, and then kind of like educating yourself about the different categories, and then expanding from there. And also, like I said, the social, cultural aspect of rum, I think, is more than 50% of what's important about rum.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating. And if you are like a history buff, you like anything historical.
I was at the grocery store today after reading this. I was like, I think I'm about to become a history nerd. I mean, a lot of the movement of rum was like the history is just steeped in like war times, colonization, like all like so many historical events, like and then prohibition, like what happened to the way people drink during and after prohibition. I didn't realize this, but apparently like the first flight out of the United States happened just after prohibition started.
Really?
So then it's like, okay, so now people have access to get out to go travel and drink outside of the U.S. because they can't here.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating. I'm like, yeah, I think I'm about to become a history nerd.
You should also look into Real McCoy rum because that started with a documentary filmmaker, an Emmy award-winning documentary filmmaker, was doing a documentary on Bill McCoy, who is a very famous like bootlegger essentially during Prohibition, and he was rum runner, I should say.
Yeah.
And in the process of doing all this research, Bailey, the filmmaker and now owner of the brand Rum McCoy, he came across a bunch of these photos of Bill McCoy standing next to barrels of rum, and the barrels of rum said Barbados and a date, and in like doing all this research, he discovered that it really could only have come from the Foursquare Distillery, and so, which, you know, still exists today, and so he worked with Richard Seal from the Foursquare Distillery to create the Real McCoy rum, and where Real McCoy comes from is that everybody knew that something coming from Bill McCoy was the real deal, and you weren't getting some sort of like bathtub gin product. And he would actually, what he would do is he'd have like these big boats, barges, whatever, out far enough from the like the coast of the U.S. that it was like considered international waters, and he would ferry people out to go drink on them. Yeah,
I want to be
all of
that
this
now.
rum, right? The documentary is fascinating.
Okay.
I'm sure you can find it on YouTube, but the story of that brand is really cool, and it goes to show like how crucial rum is to, like, we say that's a Real McCoy all the time, and that is like a almost rum-based term.
Yeah. I actually didn't know where that came from. Yeah, I know, movie night.
It's pretty short, but it's really good.
Cool.
Awesome.
Final
thank
question?
you. And then we do have one last question.
God, you guys seem really excited.
And you're allowed to think about it for a
Yes,
second.
you are, totally. So we're called Crying in the Walk-In, and every episode we like to share a bar story of sorts, either crying in the walk-in based,
or something
or
that
just
might make
any,
you want to cry
or
in a
something that
walk-in.
want to make you cry in a walk-in, or
Have
any
you
other bar
ever?
story.
Have I ever cried in a walk-in?
Yeah, sorry.
A million times.
Yeah. Have you ever?
Man.
Right now, I work at a place where we don't have a walk-in, so I have nowhere to go to cry.
Yeah,
Terror.
Rumba didn't have a walk-in until we built Inside Passage.
Yeah.
And having a walk-in again was like a life-altering experience because it was just a place to go and get away. Actually, at Rumba, my walk-in became the rum attic.
Yeah.
It was upstairs.
Yeah.
I did a lot of crying up there. Gosh.
So sad.
Oh, man. I mean, there's so many.
Yeah.
The first one that comes to mind, actually, was my first real, like, big deal service industry job, like, outside of Applebee's and the dive bar.
Mm-hmm.
Working at that place, it was the beer bar that turned into a club at night. It was my first time on the floor, and again, not prepared. No idea what I had never served before. I mean, I had served at Applebee's. Yeah. But that was a place of like, you know, I had 5 tables or whatever. So then I'm serving at this place that, you know, I have to have all this beer knowledge and like the very extensive menu, food, and then later it would be shots and whatever. At the end of that shift, I was so overwhelmed. I had like lost payments. I had rang things up on the wrong tickets. I had like every mistake I could have made.
Oh, I'm getting like war flashbacks.
Yeah.
Oh, horrible. I was like $150 in the hole. Like I had lost money. At the end of the night.
Yeah.
That's how bad I was. Okay. Horrible at my job. And I was sobbing, and my manager was like, "Jen, we're not going to make you pay for it. It's fine. Just please learn from this and don't ever do it again."
Yeah.
And I just remember I was closing. It was like, I think my first shift out of training too. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was closing down, and I had a really big crush on the bartender that was working.
Damn.
It's a canon event.
Yeah. His name was Rian. He was a horrible person to have a crush on. Cause, yeah, he was a horrible person.
I mean, we've all had a crush on a bartender like that.
So hot, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. He has to be.
It's part of the thing.
Yeah. So, as part of, like, the closing duties, you know how you have those, like, sinks, like, in the back, and then you have the glass rack things, holders up top that are, like, made of metal, like, they are at an angle. That was for the dirty glasses before you sent them through. Well, as part of the closing duties, you had to send the glass racks through final time so they were clean, and you had to clean off the upper part. And the way that they teach you to do it, like Rian was like, oh yeah, you just take like the sanitizer hose and you just kind of spray it like with like you do with a garden hose or whatever. Put your thumb over it, just like spray it. When I tell you that when I tried to do that, I like pulled the whole thing out, like water went everywhere. I drenched myself.
No.
He came in, was laughing his ass off at me.
Yeah.
And he was like, let me show you how to do that. I was clearly an idiot because he just grabbed it and did it and just like laughing till he was crying. And then I just started sobbing again.
Oh no, Jen, baby Jen.
Baby Jen crying so hard. And that was probably the worst that has ever happened. That I can remember off the top of my head, other than just like, you know, the first 6 months of working at Rumba was our 5-year anniversary. We had like 5 events and seminars, and I worked over 100 hours that week. And I think at the end, I ended up like crying because I was just like dead inside.
Yeah, you were like, my
that's
body
the only
and mind
release
are
that you
done.
can.
I was just like dead.
Oh my god, that's so much.
Have you done anything crazy in walking? Other than crying?
Yes.
Jen giggles.
You don't have to elaborate.
I mean, I'll tell you. I'm not going to tell you.
Or it doesn't even have to be you.
No, it's me.
Okay. Hell yeah.
When I first moved to Seattle, I was very into like meeting the locals, if you know what I mean.
Sure, yeah.
Tinder. And I met this guy. Actually, yes. So I met this guy, and we had a wonderful first date. He took me to a bar down kind of in Pioneer Square. I'm not going to say which one because it'll out a guy that still freaking works there. This is like 12 years ago. And he took me to this bar, and then after that, we went to the Seattle Underground tour. It was great. It's my first time doing that.
Yeah.
So so I met him at this bar. It was a divey bar, and I got there before him because I am an anxiously always early, except for today, kind of person. And I'm sitting there. I remember exactly what I was wearing. I was wearing a black bodysuit and a red skirt. It was so like 2010.
Yeah. Did it have the buttons up the front of the skirt?
No, it did not.
Okay.
But it did have a big black belt.
Okay.
I was gonna say, was there a belt?
Yes, there was a belt. And I was wearing boots.
Okay.
Tall boots. And they were probably honestly brown. I don't know. So the bartender, because I'm alone, it's like Friday night. He starts chatting me up, and I'm like, this guy's cute. He wasn't actually cute. He was definitely in his late 30s, and he had like a little, like his hair was really short except for in the front. It was like kind of up, like in that.
Oh, the little like toothpaste,
like this, like up in the front, just like kind of spiky in the front.
Gel.
Yeah. So weird. And he had like little tiny gauged ears, the ones that were like kind of cringy, not quite like not
like a real gauge.
Yeah, like
really small.
Just like I have
you're
gauged
trying.
ears, but
like if you took them out the next day, they'd be
big
normal.
close.
So,
we were young,
and he spelled his name really fucking weird. It was such a dumb spelling of his name.
Sure.
I didn't find that out until later. But anyway, he gave his number to me when the guy showed up. So my date showed up. He went to the bathroom, and the bartender was like, "Really? That's who you're meeting?"
No.
I was like, "You can do so much better."
No.
And I was like, "Like you?" And he left me his number, and I ended up like hitting him up, and he's like, "Yeah, you should come hang out with me." And so I would go to this bar all the time, and hang out with him, and he would just give me free drinks all the time. And then if it was dead, we'd go make out in the walk-in.
Cute.
Yeah, cute until I got on his Facebook and discovered he had a longtime girlfriend. And when I was like, he texted me, he was like, "When can I see you again?" I was like, "Never. You have a girlfriend." He's like, "Yeah, and?"
Whoa.
The audacity.
Oh, man, we've been over this. God.
Yeah, he's definitely in his like mid to late 40s now, or at least looks like he's in his mid to late 40s now, and still working at that bar.
That's wild.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The man audacity.
The man. Oh, and like maybe 5 years after that, I ended up down there with a bunch of industry friends. Rocky, yay. Scott Ricks. I think Jamie Buckman was there. A bunch of like industry people. We ended up there after a Mariners game, and he was working, and he hit on me again, and he was like, "Is your number still the same?" And I was like,
"Oh no!"
I just snorted. Can I hit you up?
And he texted me. He did. He texted me.
Oh my God, Jen.
Oh boy.
I've never made out in a walk-in. These days, I don't think I'm interested.
You don't even have a walk-in though, babe.
I know.
I'm wholly uninterested in making out in a walk-in.
Yeah.
I'm so good.
I think there was a day when I would have been like, yeah,
it was a long time
chaos,
ago,
let's
though,
go.
I was the epitome of chaos in my late 20s.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks, Jen.
Thank
You're the best.
you. Cut all that out.
Maybe.
Definitely
All right.
leaving the
Bye,
dishes
friends.
piling up.
They never pile up. I watch it. Mom, my apartment
I
is
am
clean.
perfect. I am always so clean.
Thanks for listening to Crying in the Walk-In with Sam and Kai. Find us on Instagram at cryinginthewalkin_pod and on Spotify at Crying in the Walk-In. You can find us in real life too, but only if you know us, you little freaks.